She sang to calm the dying wolf, and every alpha knelt when he claimed her voice as his only home. Trees twisted toward the sky like darkened fingers, and the moonlight struggled to pierce the thick canopy. Deep within this ancient woodland, a lone figure moved silently, her footsteps barely disturbing the fallen leaves. She was Leora, known in nearby villages as a song witch. Her voice was her gift and her burden. It could soothe pain, calm storms, and even heal those on the brink of death. But with such power came fear, for the villagers spoke of curses and spirits that could twist beauty into sorrow. Leora did not fear the forest. She had grown up listening to its murmurs and learning its rhythms. Tonight, however, the forest felt different. The wind carried the scent of iron and smoke, the trees shivering as if warning her. She followed the trail instinctively, guided by a faint pulse of life that called out to her like a whisper of wind through the leaves. There, in a shadowed clearing, she found him. A massive wolf lay crumpled upon the ground, silver fur matted with blood, eyes half-closed in pain. Its breathing was shallow, each inhale ragged and strained. Leora's heart tightened. Most people would have turned and fled, but she could not. Her voice had never known silence, and now it stirred with urgency. Kneeling beside him, she placed her hands lightly on his flanks. "SHH, I'm here," she whispered. Her voice was soft, like wind brushing over a field of night-blooming flowers. "You are not alone." The wolf's ears twitched. Its golden eyes flickered open, staring into hers with a mixture of fear and wild recognition. Leora could feel the heat of his life slipping away, the sharp edges of suffering cutting through the air between them. She inhaled slowly and let her song rise, trembling at first, then growing with a steady rhythm, a melody that seemed older than the forest itself. Notes fell like silver raindrops, filling the clearing, weaving around the gnarled trees. The wolf's body shivered, muscles relaxing as if the song carried warmth into the places pain had hollowed out. Leora's eyes met his, and she felt a strange pull, as though the wolf was more than it appeared. Something human lingered behind those golden eyes, a spark that reached toward her soul. Hours passed, or perhaps minutes. Time seemed to bend in the presence of her song. The wolf's breathing evened, strength returning slowly, though its eyes held a haunted, ancient sadness. Leora finally allowed herself to step back, her voice fading into silence. "You are strong," she said softly, "but not invincible." Then it happened. The wolf rose, massive and trembling, yet graceful. Its gaze never left her, and in that gaze, Leora felt a pulse of recognition, as if the forest itself had exhaled. Something inside the creature shifted, a power that seemed restrained for centuries now pressing forward. The wolf, Kale, though she did not yet know his name, lowered his massive head, brushing against her shoulder in a gesture that was both gentle and demanding. Leora shivered. She sensed a force in him, primal and noble, a spirit bound by chains only she could touch. "You are no ordinary creature," she murmured. "There is more to you than I understand." Kale let out a low, vibrating sound, almost like a growl of acknowledgement. Then, with a sudden rush, he vanished into the forest shadows, leaving Leora alone with the echo of her song. She knelt there, heart pounding, the air thick with magic and the weight of something ancient stirring around her. The next morning, rumors began to spread through nearby villages. Children whispered of a silver wolf that walks with the wind, and elders spoke of a curse long forgotten but not broken. Leora did not go looking for the wolf. Yet over the next few nights she sensed him near, shadows moving where none should be, golden eyes glimmering in the dark. Then came the night of the storm. Lightning tore across the sky, revealing Kale in full, massive form, his silver fur soaked, eyes glowing with an unnatural light. He did not attack. He did not flee. He waited, watching her with intensity that made her pulse quicken. Leora felt a mixture of awe and fear. Something about this wolf demanded trust, yet spoke of danger in the same breath. "You come to me," she whispered into the storm. "Why?" Kale did not answer in words, but the tilt of his head, the fire in his gaze, and the trembling of his body conveyed a message older than language. I am bound. I am lost. I need you. The rain drenched them both, yet Leora stepped closer. Her gift had always been her song, but now something deeper urged her forward. A desire to understand, to reach beyond fear and touch the shadowed soul beneath the fur and claws. She began to sing, letting her voice rise over the roar of the storm. This song was different, less about healing, more about connection. Each note wove around Kale, not to soothe, but to reach, to call forth the truth he had buried beneath centuries of pain. The storm seemed to still, as if the forest itself leaned in to listen. Kale's body shuddered, then changed. His muscles tightened and twisted, silver fur melting into pale skin, golden eyes transforming into deep amber human eyes. In a heartbeat, the wolf became Kale, standing tall and imposing, yet vulnerable in a way that struck Leora's heart like lightning. He was beautiful and terrible all at once, an alpha tempered by suffering, a force of nature trapped in human form. He looked at her, searching her face as if trying to memorize her voice, her hands, her very soul. Kale began, his voice a low rumble, roughened by the long years in wolf form. I do not know how to thank you. You do not need to, Leora whispered. You are alive, and that is enough. But Kale did not move. He studied her as though she held the key to something he had forgotten, something sacred. His presence pressed upon her chest, heavy and demanding, yet strangely protective. Leora felt the stirrings of fear and longing, emotions she could not name but could not ignore. Then, like a shadow flickering across the moon, a chilling presence appeared at the edge of the clearing. Leora sensed it immediately, a darkness not of the forest but of deliberate malice. The air grew colder and the wind carried a voice, soft but cruel, echoing in her mind. She is mine. Leave her or your song will become silence forever. Kale's hands clenched at his sides, his jaw tightening. Stay behind me, he warned, his eyes never leaving the shadowed edge of the trees. Leora nodded, heart pounding, understanding the danger she had drawn into with her gift. This was more than a wolf. This was more than a man. And now, an enemy older than either of them sought her voice for a purpose she could not yet imagine. The storm broke into thunder and lightning again, and Kale took a step forward, tall and unwavering. Leora's voice rose instinctively, weaving through the rain, weaving courage into his stance, weaving hope into the darkness around them. And in that moment the bond between them was sealed, not by choice, but by necessity. She had sung to calm a dying wolf. And in return, she had awakened an alpha whose heart, though wounded, recognized her as home. The wind carried a warning, sharp and clear. The sorceress who had cursed Kale watched them now, and she would not wait long before taking what she desired. Leora and Kale stood together, soaked and trembling, and the forest held its breath, waiting for the first move in a war that had already begun. Hook. As the moon broke through the storm clouds, Kale turned to Leora, his amber eyes burning with resolve. You have saved me, he said, but now we are both marked, and I will not let them take you, not ever. The clearing fell silent, save for the whisper of leaves and the faint echo of a song that had awakened more than life. It had awakened destiny. The forest breathed with shadows as Leora and Kale moved cautiously through the dense undergrowth. The rain from the storm had soaked the earth, and the scent of wet pine and moss filled the air. Every step they took seemed to echo through the silent woods, as if the trees themselves were watching, remembering. Kale stayed close to Leora, a protective presence that made her pulse quicken. Though he appeared human now, she could sense the raw strength beneath his skin, the same strength that had carried him through centuries of pain and betrayal. Kale had not yet spoken of the curse that had bound him to wolf form, and Leora did not press. Instead, she let her voice fill the forest in quiet hums and whispers, melodies that blended with the rustling leaves. Her gift had always been a private solace, but with Kale nearby, it became a shared language, one that needed no words. He followed her without hesitation, watching her carefully. There was a tension in him that seemed to settle over the clearing like fog, part instinct, part fear, and part something deeper he could not name. She noticed it, even as she tried to focus on guiding them both safely through the shadowed paths. "You do not speak much," Leora said softly, breaking the silence. "I do not know what to say," Kale admitted. His voice was low, rich with the resonance of authority yet laced with uncertainty. "You saved me. I owe you more than words." "You owe me nothing," she replied, her eyes meeting his. "You are alive. That is enough." But she did not mention the strange pull she felt when he was near. The way her chest tightened when his gaze lingered, or how her voice seemed to rise naturally when he listened, as if the forest itself encouraged her to sing for him alone. As they walked deeper into the woods, the shadows grew heavier, and the wind carried whispers that made Leora's skin prickle. These were not ordinary whispers of the forest. They were deliberate, threaded with malice and cunning. Kale stiffened beside her, sensing the presence before it revealed itself. "Someone is watching us," he murmured, his eyes scanning the darkness. Leora's heart skipped a beat. She had felt it too, a chill at the edge of her senses. Her song had healed, soothed, and protected, but it had also drawn attention. She had no doubt now that the sorceress who had cursed Kale was near, her dark intent rippling through the trees. "Then we must be careful," Leora said, her voice steady even as fear brushed against her thoughts. Kale nodded, muscles tensing. "I will not let her take you," he said. His words were simple, but the weight behind them was immense. It was not just a promise. It was a vow, carved from centuries of survival and sharpened by the pain of loss. For the next days, they moved through the forest cautiously. Leora's songs guided them, not only soothing Kale's lingering pain, but also keeping the land itself from turning hostile. Creatures of shadow and claw would sometimes approach, drawn by her voice, and Kale would step forward, an alpha protecting his mate, his presence enough to command fear and respect. At night when they camped beneath ancient trees, Leora sang softly to herself, weaving melodies that carried both hope and warning. Kale would sit near the fire, silent and watchful, his amber eyes reflecting the flames. Occasionally he would speak of the past, the betrayal that had led to his curse, the alphas who had challenged him, the sorceress who had stolen everything he had loved. Leora listened, never interrupting, offering only her presence and the gentle resonance of her voice. One evening, as the moon rose high, Kale approached her as she sang a quiet lullaby to a wounded deer they had rescued. The creature had fallen into a trap set by hunters, and Leora's song had eased its pain. "You are remarkable," Kale said, his voice low, almost reverent. "I only do what I can," Leora replied, her fingers brushing over the deer's fur, calming it further. "It is the forest that teaches me. My voice is only a part of it." Kale knelt beside her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from his body. "Your voice, it does more than heal. It reaches something in me I thought was lost forever." Her breath caught. The intensity in his amber eyes was unlike anything she had ever encountered. It was as if he could see into her very soul, tracing the lines of fear, hope, and longing she often kept hidden. "I do not know why it affects you," she whispered, almost afraid of the answer. Kale's hand hovered near hers, trembling slightly. "Because it reaches what even I cannot touch," he said. I trust you, Leora, more than anyone." The forest seemed to hush around them, the wind ceasing its whisper, the leaves holding their breath. Leora realized in that moment that trust had become more than a word. It was a bridge between them, fragile yet unbreakable. But peace was fleeting. The shadows shifted suddenly, and Leora sensed the sorceress drawing closer, her power radiating like cold fire. Kale rose instantly, his stance protective, his eyes scanning the darkness for any movement. "She is near," Kale warned, his voice tight with anger and caution. Leora's heart raced. "Then we must prepare," she said. Her voice, usually soft and melodic, carried an edge of steel now. She began to sing, low and steady, a song that wrapped around the trees, the earth, and Kale himself, strengthening their bond, weaving protection into every note. The forest responded, shadows twisting, branches rising to shield them. Kale felt the surge of energy, the way her song could bend the wild to their will. It was intoxicating, and he realized the depth of their connection. She was not just a healer or singer. She was a force, and he was drawn to it, bound by something he had never felt before: hope. That night, under the canopy of stars and the watchful trees, Kale and Leora faced each other in silence. Words were unnecessary. The forest, the song, and their shared presence spoke volumes. And yet both knew that danger was not far behind. A rustle in the underbrush, subtle yet deliberate, broke the fragile calm. Kale stepped in front of Leora, eyes narrowing. "You will not touch her," he said, voice low and commanding. The wind shifted, and for a brief moment Leora thought she saw a shadowy figure, distant yet unmistakable. A chill ran through her veins, a whisper of the sorceress' cruel intent. She felt the weight of the coming battle, of choices they would be forced to make. And yet, amidst the fear, she felt a strange warmth. Kale's hand brushing hers, the trust in his eyes, the safety that came from knowing he would fight for her as fiercely as she would fight for him. "You are not alone," Kale said softly, his voice carrying the authority of one who had survived centuries of betrayal. "And I will not let you be harmed, not by her, not by anyone." Leora's heart ached with both longing and fear. She understood in that moment that her life had changed forever. The forest, the wolf, the man Kale, had woven themselves into her destiny, and though danger stalked them from the shadows, she felt a spark of something she had never known: belonging. The sorceress' presence lingered like a dark cloud, unseen but palpable. Leora knew that the coming days would test their bond, their courage, and the limits of her gift. But for the first time, she believed that song, trust, and love could challenge even the oldest curses. As the first light of dawn broke through the treetops, Leora sang softly, a melody meant not just for healing but for connection, for courage, for hope. Kale listened, standing close, his amber eyes fixed on her face, silently vowing that no shadow, no curse, no sorceress would separate them. Hook. From the edge of the forest, hidden in shadow, the sorceress watched and smiled, her eyes glinting with malice. "So the wolf has found his song witch," she murmured. "But soon her voice will belong to me, and the alpha will kneel not to her but to me." The forest shivered in anticipation. Danger, magic, and destiny were converging, and Leora and Kale's bond was about to be tested in ways they could not yet imagine. The forest had grown darker, almost as if the trees themselves feared what was coming. Even the wind seemed hesitant, moving softly among the branches, carrying whispers that made Leora's skin prickle. She and Kale had traveled further than before, deeper into the heart of the cursed woods, following trails that only she could sense through the faint echoes of life and magic. The sorceress had not attacked yet, but her presence was everywhere. Shadows seemed to twist unnaturally, and small animals fled at their approach. Leora's songs, once gentle and comforting, had grown stronger, almost urgent, carrying threads of protection and warning. With each note, she could feel her own strength slowly being drawn into the forest, as if her gift required a price for the magic she unleashed. Kale noticed it too. He had grown accustomed to the rhythms of the forest and the subtle ways it responded to Leora's voice. But even he could not ignore the tension in her movements, the faint weariness in her eyes. "You are pushing yourself too hard," he said softly as they paused by a small stream, the water reflecting the pale light of a waning moon. "Your song is powerful, but it takes more from you than you realize." Leora shook her head, her hair damp from the mist. "I have no choice," she whispered. "If I do not sing, the forest suffers. The creatures, even you, Kale, would be in danger." Kale knelt beside her, his amber eyes full of concern. "Then we will face it together," he said firmly. "Do not carry this alone, Leora. Let me bear some of the weight. Let me fight with you, not just for you." Her chest tightened. The words were simple, yet they carried the weight of centuries of pain and solitude he had endured. For the first time, Leora felt the true depth of his devotion, not only to her safety but to her very being. She wanted to trust him completely, to let her fear dissolve into the warmth of his presence. But the pull of destiny, the curse, and the sorceress, looming threat made it impossible to relax fully. They continued through the forest until they reached a glade where the trees bent away as if afraid to touch the ground. A faint light shimmered at its center, revealing the remains of animals and twisted plants, lifeless under a blackened spell. The sorceress had begun her work. "This is her doing," Kale said, his voice tight with anger. He stepped forward, shoulders squared, the alpha in him rising instinctively. "She will pay for this." Leora knelt and placed her hands on the earth. Her voice rose in a melody that wound around the poisoned soil, coaxing life back into the fallen leaves and broken branches. Each note carried a part of her, a fragile offering that stretched her strength thin. The glade began to stir. Tiny sprouts broke through the blackened ground, the scent of moss and new growth returning. Yet with every pulse of magic, Leora felt fatigue pressing against her bones. Kale stayed close, placing a protective hand over hers, lending her the steady warmth of his presence. He whispered encouragements, short and simple, yet they carried the force of his unwavering will. "You are stronger than this curse. I will not let it harm you." But the sorceress did not remain hidden. From the shadows, a chilling laugh echoed, a sound that cut through the forest like a blade. Leora stopped singing, her heart pounding as she looked up. At the edge of the glade, the sorceress appeared, a figure cloaked in black and violet, eyes glimmering with cruel delight. "Ah, the little song witch dares to defy me," the sorceress said, her voice smooth and deadly. "And the wolf-turned man is foolish enough to protect her." How touching! Kale stepped between Leora and the sorceress, his body tense. "Leave her," he growled. "She is not yours to claim." The sorceress' smile widened, sharp and terrifying. "Oh, but she is mine. Her voice will belong to me, and through it all life and all power will bend to me. You cannot stop me, Alpha." Kale's amber eyes burned. "We will see about that." The sorceress raised her hands, and shadows erupted from the ground like living serpents, twisting and striking toward Leora. Without hesitation, Kale lunged forward, throwing himself between the attacks and Leora. His strength and speed were extraordinary, but the sorceress' power was older and darker than anything he had faced. Leora rose to her feet, fear and determination battling within her. She could not let the sorceress touch Kale or the forest. Her voice trembled at first, then grew with clarity and force, weaving a melody that wrapped around Kale and the attacking shadows. The song was both shield and sword, pushing back the dark magic, binding the forest to protect them. Kale met her gaze, his expression a mix of awe and concern. "Do not overdo it," he urged. "You are giving too much." But Leora could not stop. Each note was a plea, a command, a declaration. She sang not only to protect the forest and Kale, but to confront the darkness that had haunted her life. The shadows screamed and twisted in pain, but the sorceress' laughter rang sharper than ever. "You cannot sustain this forever," she said. "The song witch will fall, and then the wolf will kneel to me, as all alphas must." Kale moved closer, placing a hand on Leora's shoulder, grounding her. His presence strengthened her, anchoring her in the moment. "I will not let you take her," he said firmly. "If she falls, I rise with her." Leora's eyes met his, and in that instant the weight of their bond became undeniable. She realized the truth. Kale was not just a protector. He was a part of her song, just as she had become a part of his soul. They were intertwined, their fates inseparable. With renewed strength, Leora sang a final note, long and resonant, carrying a force that seemed to shake the very earth. The shadows recoiled, the sorceress faltered, and for a moment the forest fell into silence. The glade began to breathe again, life returning to the poisoned earth. The sorceress hissed, retreating into the darkness. "This is not over," she said. "I will have her voice, and when I do, the Alpha will kneel and the forest will bow to me." Kale lowered his hands, still trembling from the exertion, and turned to Leora. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice soft now, filled with concern and wonder. Leora sank to the ground, exhaustion weighing heavily upon her. I will be," she whispered, though she knew she had pushed herself too far. Her gift had a cost, and she had felt it pressing into her bones, draining her life as it healed the forest. Kale knelt beside her, gathering her into his arms. "Rest," he said softly. "You have done more than anyone could ask. You have saved life and you have saved me." Her voice, though weak, found strength in the closeness of his presence. "I did not save you alone," she said. "You helped me, Kale. You gave me courage." Their eyes met, and for a moment the forest seemed to hold its breath. No words were needed. The bond between them was clear. They had faced the darkness together, and their trust, their shared strength had carried them through. But the threat was far from over. The sorceress' power had been delayed, not destroyed, and her desire for Leora's song would only grow stronger. Leora and Kale knew that future trials would test them even more, forcing them to confront fears, make sacrifices, and face the depths of both their hearts and their power. As dawn broke over the glade, the first light filtering through the canopy, Leora allowed herself a moment to rest against Kale's chest. Her song had healed more than the forest. It had healed part of him, part of her, and part of the bond that now tied them together. Kale's hand brushed a strand of hair from her face, and his amber eyes, filled with both fierceness and tenderness, held hers. "No matter what comes next," he said, "we face it together. I will not let her touch you. Not ever." Leora nodded, her heart full of both fear and hope. She knew that the coming days would be dangerous, that the sorceress would strike again, and that every note she sang would carry a price. But for the first time, she also knew that she was not alone. Kale's strength, his courage, and his unwavering presence were hers to lean on, and together they would face whatever darkness lay ahead. "Hook!" In the shadows beyond the glade, the sorceress' eyes glinted with cruel amusement. "They think they have won," she whispered. "But soon, the song witch will belong to me, and the wolf who dares to protect her will kneel before my power." The forest trembled subtly, as if sensing the storm of magic, love, and destiny that was still to come. Leora and Kale's bond had grown stronger, but the true test, one that would challenge both their hearts and their lives, was still waiting in the shadows. The forest shivered with a tension that made even the oldest trees seem to lean closer. Darkness clung to the ground, shadows twisting and flickering like living creatures. Leora and Kale moved cautiously, aware that the sorceress' power had only grown since their last encounter. The air itself seemed heavy, as if the forest carried the weight of the coming battle. Kale walked beside Leora, his amber eyes scanning the shadows for the first sign of attack. Though human now, he retained the grace, strength, and instincts of the alpha he had once been, and his presence was a shield for Leora as much as a warning to anyone who might challenge them. Leora felt the familiar hum of her own magic, a steady pulse that rose from the earth and through her veins. Her voice had always been a gift and a weapon, but tonight it felt different. Tonight it carried the weight of destiny, of choice, and of the bond she shared with Kale. "They are close," Kale murmured, his voice low and certain. "I can feel it in the air. She will strike soon." "I know," Leora said softly. Her fingers brushed the bark of a nearby tree, grounding herself. "But we are ready, together." They reached the heart of the forest, where the trees arched high above to form a natural cathedral of shadow and light. At its center, the ground was blackened, poisoned by the sorceress' magic. From this darkness, a figure emerged, gliding toward them like a wraith. The sorceress, cloaked in black and violet, her eyes gleaming with cruel intent, stepped into the glade, her presence radiating cold fire. "You persist," she said, her voice silky and venomous. "The wolf and the song witch, how touching, but the end has come. Her voice will be mine, and through it all life will bow to me." Kale stepped in front of Leora, muscles coiled and ready. "You will not touch her," he said, voice deep and commanding. "I will not allow it." The sorceress laughed, a sound that echoed like shattered glass through the glade. "You think your strength is enough to stop me. You are nothing but a shadow of the wolf you once were." Leora drew a deep breath, feeling the pulse of her song stirring in her chest. She knew the cost. Each note would draw from her life, every word a sacrifice. Yet she could not hesitate, not when Kale's life and the forest itself was at stake. She began to sing, low and trembling at first, then rising in power and clarity. The melody wove through the air, touching every leaf, branch, and creature, binding them together in protection. The shadows that the sorceress sent toward them shrieked and recoiled, unable to touch the strength of her song. Kale moved beside her, his presence amplifying her power. He stepped into the spell of her song, letting it flow through him, focusing his alpha strength and courage. Together, their bond became a shield and a sword. Shadows twisted violently, clawing at them, but they held. The sorceress' eyes narrowed. "You are stronger than I expected," she hissed. "But this is only a delay. Soon, the song witch will tire, and then all will fall." Leora's voice faltered slightly, fatigue pressing against her chest. Kale noticed immediately and reached for her, anchoring her with a steady touch. "You are not alone," he said. "Lean on me, trust me. We end this together." The words gave her strength. She let her melody flow into him, into the forest, into every living thing that had gathered around them in quiet support. The blackened ground began to shift and stir, life returning where it had been poisoned. The air shimmered with magic, and the forest itself seemed to rise, drawn into their will. The sorceress' fury erupted like a storm. Dark energy lashed out, aiming directly at Leora. Kale intercepted it, drawing the blow toward himself, letting her voice shield him. Sparks of shadow and song collided, lighting the glade in an otherworldly glow. "You cannot win," the sorceress screamed. "Her voice will belong to me." Kale's grip on Leora tightened. "No," he said, firm and unwavering. "You will not take her, not now, not ever." Leora felt her exhaustion clawing at her, but she also felt something else. A deep, unshakable bond with Kale, a power born of trust, love, and shared struggle. With one final, soaring note, she poured everything she had into the forest, into Kale, into the moment. The melody struck the sorceress like a physical force, pushing her back, unraveling her shadowy spells and exposing her weakness. The sorceress staggered, eyes wide with disbelief. "Impossible, how?" Kale stepped forward, strength and resolve shining in every movement. "Because she is not alone," he said. "And neither am I." The forest responded to their combined will. Trees twisted, roots rose, and the shadows were drawn into the earth. The sorceress shrieked as her power began to crumble, unable to withstand the bond between Alpha and Songwitch, the trust and love that fueled Leora's voice. With one final scream, she vanished into the darkness, leaving the glade still and quiet. Leora sank to her knees, utterly spent. Her chest rose and fell rapidly, her hands trembling. Kale knelt beside her, gathering her into his arms. His amber eyes were soft, full of awe and tenderness. "You did it," he whispered. "You saved the forest and you saved me." Leora looked up at him, voice barely above a whisper. "We did it together." He brushed her hair back from her face, their foreheads touching. "Your song, it is home to me," he said. "Not just your voice, but you, all of you. I claim you, Leora, not because of power, but because I choose you." Her heart swelled, tears blurring her vision. The fear, the fatigue, and the terror of the past days melted in the warmth of his presence. "And I choose you," she whispered, her voice trembling with emotion. The forest seemed to exhale, sunlight breaking through the canopy and scattering across the glade. Life returned fully, birds sang, leaves shimmered, and the air was sweet with the scent of renewal. The bond between them, forged in danger and strengthened by trust, had become unbreakable. But the world outside the forest had also taken notice. Rival alphas and kingdoms, previously drawn by whispers of the Song Witch and the Silver Wolf, began to approach, humbled and wary of the power that Leora and Kale now commanded. No longer would they be merely feared, they would be respected, their unity a symbol of hope and balance. Kale held Leora close, feeling the weight of what they had endured. "We have won today," he said softly, "but our story it has only just begun. Together we will face whatever comes next." Leora's voice rose in a quiet song, a melody of healing and love, binding the forest, Kale, and herself together. Each note carried joy, relief, and the promise of a future where darkness would always meet light, and strength would always be tempered by love. The forest, once cursed and twisted, now thrived. The creatures that had hidden or fled returned, curious and unafraid. Even the wind seemed lighter, carrying whispers of their triumph to distant lands. Kale and Leora stood together in the glade, a perfect balance of strength and gentleness, of courage and song. Their bond was legend already, though it had just begun. Alphas knelt, not in fear, but in respect for the power of love and trust. The forest itself seemed to bow, acknowledging the new order forged not by domination or fear, but by unity, compassion, and choice. Kale brushed his thumb across Leora's cheek. "You are my voice, my home," he said, "and I am yours." Leora smiled through exhaustion, her heart full of hope. "And together we will heal the world," she said. For the first time in centuries, the forest was quiet, peaceful, and alive, not in fear but in harmony. Shadows lingered as they always would, but now they were no longer a threat. The bond between the Alpha and the Song Witch had turned fear into strength, darkness into light, and magic into love. Hook closing. As the sun rose fully, scattering the last remnants of night, Leora began a new song, a song for the future, for the forest, and for the Alpha who had chosen her. And Kale, standing at her side, knew that no matter what challenges awaited them, they would face them together, their hearts and their destinies intertwined forever.